Good morning, guys. This is Malcolm Groves from Code Partners. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for coming along to join us for this webinar. I know we've still got a bunch of people coming into the webinar as we speak. Hopefully over the next few minutes that'll fill up a little bit, but what we're here for is for the web development with ExtJS for Delphi developer session. I guess it could have been longer and I could have said for Delphi and C++ builder developers, which is more accurate, but it's a long title as it is. So thank you. Thank you for coming along. What we are going to go through today, here's the agenda up on the screen at the moment. I'm going to do I've actually got the easy job today. Fernando, who I'll introduce in a second, has done most of the hard work. I'm going to do some intros and talk a little bit at a high level about what ExtJS is. Then Fernando's going to go in deeper into how you actually use it and more particularly how you integrate it with some of your existing Delphi code and as a, put the Delphi on the back end and ExtJS on the front end. So that's really the meat of the presentation. And then I'll come back and talk a little bit about ExtJS versus things like Angular, because it's a question we get quite often. And interestingly, we've been doing a couple of Angular projects recently, so that's fresh in my mind actually. So I'll talk a little bit about that, what the various editions are, explain how it's licensed, that kind of stuff, and then also look at where to go next. In terms of grabbing a trial version, looking at some more examples and more real world usage of ExtJS, and then at the very end I'll just talk about a couple of things. Given you've all given us a couple of hours of your time this morning, a couple of offers that we've got for attendees that you can take advantage of. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. The presenters today, it's a requirement. This has just occurred to me. I didn't notice this before. It's a requirement to be a presenter on this that you have to wear a black polo shirt and stand with your arms crossed. So that's me on the left, Malcolm. I run Code Partners. Fernando, like I said, who's done the bulk of the work here on the right-hand side. He's a software consultant at Embarcadero and is actually up in his evening tonight, so I think we're spanning most of the time zones around the world on this webinar. So that's who's going to be doing the bulk of the presentation today. But I also want to introduce someone called Jean-Philippe, who's on the webinar, and unfortunately I couldn't find a photo of him in a black polo with his arms crossed, but we'll have to fix that. Jean-Philippe is kind of the man when it comes to ExtJS. He's based in New Zealand, which is awesome for us. It's almost our time zone, or for some of you it is your time zone, but it's close to most of our time zones. And he's been involved in web development and JavaScript, and in particular ExtJS for a long time. He's spoken at Accenture conferences. He's now focused on doing sort of consulting and training and project work around ANZ and Asia Pacific. So Jean-Philippe's joining us. He's going to be on the Q&A, helping us answer the deeper ExtJS questions. So Jean-Philippe, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes, yes, it's a pleasure to me to be here today.
I hope that introduction was okay. Did I leave out anything super important?
Oh, no, no, it's all right. Thank you.
All right. So I think at the end, we'll be answering questions in the chat window during the presentation, myself and Fernando and Jean-Philippe. But then at the end, and so if you've got questions as we're going, just pile them into the questions tab inside GoToWebinar, and we'll try and deal with them. I think at the end we'll come back, depending on how we go for time, we'll come back and maybe take some of the more interesting ones, or the ones that we think apply to lots of people, and deal with them sort of on the presentation. So don't be shy about asking your questions. Yeah. Okay. If you're not aware, Code Partners, so this webinar is being run between Embarcadero and Code Partners, and I'm sure you're all aware of who Embarcadero are. It's a session aimed at Delphi developers, so, you know, that's kind of self-selecting. Code Partners, that's the company that I'm involved in. We are the local sort of master reseller for Embarcadero, and we really focus on, especially on development and DevOps lifecycle, so we represent Embarcadero, but also a bunch of other developer and DevOps related tools, and we sort of provide the tools and the training and services and that sort of thing around those. So that's who we are, if you're not aware. Okay, so let's get into probably the more interesting stuff. This is what you've come for. Really, what is ExtJS? And I think you know, in some ways, I've been in the same shoes as I think many of the people on this webinar, because some time ago, you know, some months ago, when the acquisition of Sencha by Embarcadero was announced, my first sort of response was, what's Sencha? What's ExtJS? You know, why is Embarcadero buying this? So then that's when I started digging in to try and understand what this was all about. And so I've just got a few slides here to try and position ExtJS and sort of where it fits, how it relates to what we as Delphi and CBuilder people maybe think about, and what, you know, other web frameworks might be out there. It's kind of high level, but I'm just trying to position it. Fernando's going to go a lot deeper in his session into the nuts and bolts. So if we have a look at it, I took this text from the Sencha website, and at first glance, it's easy to kind of dismiss it as a standard marketing sentence that someone might put on their website. But some of the key things, once you go through this webinar and then come back to this sentence, hopefully you'll realize that some of the key things about ExtJS that make it interesting are actually in this sentence. You know, the big focus on providing a complete solution for building web clients. When we start talking about Angular and some of the other solutions out there, which are some really cool technologies, they're not trying to provide everything you need. You typically would combine them with other pieces and potentially, you know, half a dozen or a dozen other frameworks and libraries and tools to pull together a solution or a framework for your web development. Sencha really aims at saying, okay, here's everything that you need. You can, of course, extend it and add other pieces, but we're going to give you the core pieces that you need to build something. So you don't have to go building a custom framework and solution yourself. It's just out of the box. This is what I can base it on. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's the focus on the everything in that first line. Rapidly build, you know, as Delphi and CBuilder developers, we have connotations of what that means, you know, visual drag and drop of controls, you know, properties, methods, events, those kinds of things. What's really cool is when Fernando goes through this, you'll see that ExtJS follows a really similar model. I mean, it's JavaScript, so it's not trying to be Delphi or CBuilder, but within that, I found it really quickly familiar to me as a client-side Delphi developer. So a big focus on productivity, and also lining up with a lot of Delphi and CBuilder applications is this focus on data. A lot of the ExtJS components and capabilities are really focused around getting data, getting large amounts of data, manipulating it efficiently, slicing and dicing it, presenting it to the user on the browser in an efficient fashion. So in a lot of ways, it lines up really closely with what we all know as coming from the Delphi and CBuilder side around, you know, data-intensive applications that you can build really quickly and a complete solution out of the box. Yeah. So that's at a high level what it's trying to do. And the nice thing, again, it's component based. So they're literally out of the box. You've got hundreds of components to do, you know, a lot of what you would need to do in a typical, you know, corporate dashboard or front end application, data intensive application. Yeah, kind of like you can see in this example on the screen. So really focused on data, cross-platform. It supports it out of the, interestingly, it supports out of the box some really common architectural patterns like MVC and MVVM. There's a lot of theming support so that you can change the look and feel without having to dive into your logic. A lot of tooling for debugging and testing and builds and those sorts of things and deployments out of the box. Yeah, so really focused on being this modern web framework. And the nice thing is extremely widely used. Like these are just some of the logos of people who are using it. There were lots more that I could have pulled from. And so if you look at these across these different industries, you know, the names of people who are using and who've committed and based their solutions on top of this technology is pretty impressive, which is important because you don't want to now adopt something which isn't being adopted by other people. Yeah. That's a courageous decision when you're starting a new project to pick something that nobody else is picking. So the nice news is lots of other people, large and small, are using ExtJS for their data-intensive web applications. So at a super high level, just how does it work? Fernando is probably shuddering when I go through this because he'll go through and correct all of my generalizations and that sort of thing. But at a super high level, first thing to realize is it's built on, it is a web solution. So it's built on web native technologies. So it's built on JavaScript, it's built on HTML5, it's built on CSS, yeah, which is appropriate. If you know, one of the things that I've always loved about Delphi and CBuilder is that they're native solutions. They're built on the the underlying technologies. You know, back in the day with VCL, that was built on top of the Windows API. And so, you know, yes, it made a whole bunch of things more productive, but when you really needed to get under the hood and do something, you know, deep with the Windows API, you could. Yeah, and so for a web solution, I kind of want the same thing. I want to be able to get under the covers to whatever level I want. And so it's kind of reassuring that this is all built on web native technologies. Yeah, but just to go a little bit deeper, the ExtJS is really focused on the front end. Okay, you still need a web server to serve up your pages and your you know, the starting points of your application, and you would typically still need some sort of application server on the back end, whether that's whatever that's built in, whether it's built in Node or, as we're going to show in this example, we're going to build that in Delphi, and it could be built in CBuilder, but some sort of, you know, probably REST API sitting on the back end, some sort of database. But ExtJS really lives down in the browser. Yeah, it's JavaScript based. The components are client-side JavaScript components. They're served up by a web server, but once they're served up, they start executing locally, and they're giving you that in-browser, on the client richness that a lot of applications are expecting these days. Yeah, and so at that point, once you start communicating from your client, which is your ExtJS-based application in the browser, the communication back to the server, back to that REST API that we're, in this example, going to write in Delphi, that's all communicating from the JavaScript using Ajax, talking JSON, talking XML, whatever, you know, in that particular case. Yeah, so it's the web server almost becomes just a delivery mechanism for your application, and then your application really is running client side in the browser using JavaScript. Yeah, which in some ways I think makes it a natural fit for this audience. Yeah, we've done a few projects that look like this recently, not using ExtJS, but I'm particularly interested in doing that now. But where we had Delphi or CBuilder sitting on the back end using, in our case, in most cases, we did it using RAD Server, but it could be whatever you want to use to serve up your API. You know, so that you can migrate your code. You don't have to rewrite all the business logic that's already running. So having Delphi or CBuilder on the back end, or something else, or a combination of things, .NET on the back end, Node.js on the back end. VCL or FireMonkey on the desktop or on mobile, and ExtJS in the browser, all talking back to that same common back end. So that's a really sort of common pattern that you'll see again and again in this scenario, and kind of fits nicely into a lot of existing Delphi applications. Like I said, we've been doing projects recently where we take client-server applications written in Delphi and CBuilder, start migrating that logic up to RAD Server running either in the cloud or in the data center, and gradually migrate their clients, their desktop clients, to talk to it, and their build mobile clients to talk to it. And in this case, we could be building ExtJS clients to talk back to that same common set of business logic. Yeah. So that's kind of the pattern that we're talking about. But I think, I'm not an ExtJS expert. So I think at this point, we probably wanted to dive a little bit deeper with Fernando into what's actually involved. And so, Fernando, I'm going to make you presenter, and you can take over and correct all of my broad generalizations that I've just made.
Right. No, you are correct. So, hello everyone, good morning. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. I'm really happy by participating here in this session. So again, thank you everyone so much in advance for staying here with us for the next hours. And I think you can start, right? Hello, and welcome to this webinar about ExtJS and Delphi. My name is Fernando Risotto, and I'm a software consultant from Embarcadero Technologies. So before entering the agenda details, I'd like to share something interesting with you. So by the moment you are watching this webinar at the Code Partners office, I have a kind of time traveling experience, because as you can see here, it's yesterday at the place where I'm located. Or better, I was able to send my webinar to the future, because here in São Paulo, it's Tuesday yet. So let's go back to the future, to the Code Partners office, and let's go back to our agenda. So these are the topics we are going to cover today. Let's start by understanding what is Sencha ExtJS, also how to install the framework, and the first steps to create your projects. After that, we're going to see a quick overview of Embarcadero RAD Server, and let's create some RAD Server projects, and then we're going to integrate ExtJS with RAD Server. So what is the Sencha ExtJS? Actually, ExtJS is a JavaScript framework with a rich interface that allows you to build web applications. ExtJS has a huge collection of components like grids, forms, charts, trees. Actually, we're talking about more than 100 components, everything tested and integrated inside a unique framework. Also, ExtJS has a flexible layout manager that helps you to organize your project in a concept of containers, very similar to what you have in the VCL or FireMonkey. ExtJS also has a concept of data packet that allows you to separate, to totally dissociate the data layer from the interface. And finally, ExtJS projects can be based on the MVC, Model View Controller architecture, or MVVM, the Model View Model architecture. Actually, the MVC is still supported to allow migrating old projects to the new version, but new projects should be based on the MVVM architecture. You can read more about this in this blog post. Now, let's talk a little bit about the history of ExtJS. The first version of ExtJS was created in 2006. Actually, it was a kind of extension of Yahoo user interface. After that, we had the version 2 in 2007 and the version 3 in 2009 with some good new features, but also with some concerns about the speed of the framework. In the 4.0, a lot of work to speed up the framework was done. Also, this release added the support for the MVC architecture. The 5.0 marked the change from MVC to MVVM module. Also, support for touch device and more. Finally, in the 6.0, both frameworks, the original ExtJS and the Sencha Touch, was merged in one unique framework. The latest version is the 6.5.3 that was released in January of this year. In this blog post, you can find more about the roadmap for Sencha products, not only ExtJS, but also Architect, Sencha Text, and more. So, how to download and install the framework? Sencha ExtJS is available under a commercial license and the general public license, the GPL version 3. If you choose to use the GPL version, you are required to release the source code of any project that you are creating with the ExtJS. Of course, there is a trial available for 30 days with the full package, which means not only the ExtJS framework, but also the visual tools and the automation tools. The open source version, the GPL version, has only the ExtJS framework itself, meaning only the JavaScript files. So let's explore this a little bit more. So if you go to the Sencha homepage, under the products menu, and then ExtJS, as you can see, Sencha ExtJS is more than just the ExtJS framework. The solution also includes the CMD, a tool for creating, packaging, and distributing applications, some IDE plugins, the Architect, a kind of RAD for JavaScript, Trimmer, a visual trimmer editor, and the Inspector for debugging your project. So if you go under ExtJS, you can see the framework in action in this tab, in a lot of samples that you can explore. Also, you can request a trial. And this trial allows you to use all the tools that are part of the ExtJS package. Of course, there are different license levels with different set of tools inside it, which will be discussed later. So let's take a look on a couple of demos to better understand how ExtJS library works. So I have here some scripts that I'd like to explore with you. They are very basic, but give us a good idea about how the framework is organized. To keep this simple, let's just make use of a basic text editor to look inside. Here I'm using a online version of ExtJS that's available in one of those content providers. In the same way, you have jQuery and the other frameworks available online. Of course, we are looking here to the GPL version, and it's based on the 6.0 version, which is okay for learning purposes. So this is the most basic HTML file that you can create, or an HTML document. Here we are including the HTML libraries, and here, as you can see, we're creating a component. So the framework, or the library, is totally based on components and the classes. So here we are creating a panel. We are rendering this panel to this div, also give it a size and some text. So if you run this in a browser, this is the panel based on the ExtJS framework. So we can go here and make some changes. Let's remove the size and put here a layout, fit, and this will produce this result using all the space that you have ever. So these are the kind of thing that the framework provides to you and simplify your development a lot. So let's move to the next example. This one, we are also creating a tab, a panel. But in this panel, we are adding some items. So this is going to create a concept of page control, let's say. Also, there's a new thing here, these listeners. These listeners are like an event from Delphi. So if you run this one, as you can see, we have the listeners working and a kind of tabs that you can use to better organize your interface. Another one, here we are creating two panels and putting these panels inside a container, actually a viewport. So the result of this, you can see here in the browser, the two panels side by side, and you can create here any number of panels and organize them in any kind of layout that you want. One more. In this one, by creating a container with some items inside, these items will be organized in a model of accordion layout. So if we test this one, this is the result we have. So a lot of great features, but few code, like you can see here. One more. In this one, we are using the concept of cards. So these cards allows you to create a wizard. So you can use the wizards when you are adding data and you want to perform some validations in a step-by-step. So here we are defining a panel. This panel has some buttons and the items, which are the cards itself, and the actions that will happen when the user clicks on those buttons. So testing this in the browser, this is the first panel or card, and then you can move on, next, and then you can have a finish, previews. So the perfect solution to create like a complex data entry form. One more. In this one, we are creating a form. So ExtJS provides a form concept, and this form allows you to create items. These items are actually the components that you are going to add in your form. As you can see here, you can have more than one container inside another container. And of course, you can create functions to handle the user actions. So this is to demonstrate components that you can add to a form. If you run this in the browser, this is the result. So you have text fields, text areas. You have just spray fields here. We have a date picker, buttons, radio groups, checkbox, numeric fields, spinners, time, and combos. Also, the ability to select a file, and etc. So these are the components you are going to use to create forms and the general data entry solutions. One more. This one creates a window component. So the window component allows you to create a window, like if this window is running outside of your browser. So let's take a look and so on. When I click this button, you have this window, which is independent from the browser. You can have text in here, etc. So you can fill the form and then click on save, etc. Then you have the listeners that allows you to properly respond to the user actions. One more. Here we start understanding better the concept of models, or better the MVC or MVVM models architecture inside the ExtJS framework. So if you look here, we are creating a model. So in this case, a kind of data model in our case. So you have the data definition. Then we have a store. In this case, the data is declared inside the JavaScript, so it's static. It's not. We are not loading the data from external source. And then we have the view. In this case, a grid. So this grid is using our store, the grid store, declared here, based on the student data model, declared here, and it has some columns. So as you can see here, all the columns are declared. And then we can test it here in the browser, and this is the result. You have a professional grid that allows you to do sorting, groups, and etc. with very, very few code. Let's move ahead. We have one more. This one, we are just exploring a little bit more the concept of listeners. So when the user clicks on this button, a message box alert will be presented. So if you run this on the browser, we have the message box using the theme that was defined here. In this case, the Neptune defined here in the script. And finally, this one. So here we are declaring a class. So the ExtJS framework allows you to declare new classes, personalized classes. Like this one, person, has a name, it's a property, and a getName function. So then we can extend the person class, like you can see here. And here are declaring a student class based on the person, and adding some new properties like the school name and a new function as well. This get school name. So here below, we are just declaring a new object, creating the student class, and passing the parameters in the constructor, and using the getName function. The getName was declared here in the basic class, the person. So if we run this, we get the name of the student. As you can see here, this was passed here in the first parameter, and is the name of the student. So we are using the getName, which was declared here in the basic class. So this allows you also to better organize your code. So these samples are just to introduce you to the ExtJS framework. So now that we know the basics about ExtJS, we want to go ahead and create a web application that connects to a live data source. In this webinar, we are going to use RAD Server for this job. So RAD Server is a set of solutions for creating and deploying service-based applications, so applications in general. RAD Server enables you to quickly develop your application and publish your application as a REST endpoint API. RAD Server can be distributed on a private infrastructure like Windows or Linux, but as well on cloud, on Amazon, Rackspace, Azure, or any other cloud provider. So this is an overview of the RESTs we have in RAD Server. You have the REST endpoint publishing, that allows you to create your BPLs, your code, and publish these codes, these methods, functions as a REST API. You have an integration middle, so you can connect external service and serve this data to your users using standard REST APIs. As well, some built-in application services like user management, push notifications, user location tracking, and more. So this is a conceptual vision of what RAD Server is. We have some features that I provided with the AMS server. So you have a list of the APIs that are available, users, groups, installations, push notifications, edge modules. And then you are going to start creating your resources and adding these resources to the RAD Server container. Also, part of the RAD Server, we have a database where all the data from the RAD Server is stored. In this case, we are not talking about the end user data, about your application data, but we are talking about data that is used by the RAD Server itself, where the analytics are stored, etc., users, and all the logs and the events. So, in general, you are going to create BPLs on Delphi or C++ and deploy these BPLs to the RAD Server container. The result are standard REST APIs that can be used from any other technology. Of course, from Delphi, from C++, but also any other technology that supports a REST call with JSON. We have some new features in the last version of RAD Server. This was introduced in 10.2.2. So the multi-tenancy support allows you to split a RAD Server in different configurations. So each tenant has a unique set of RAD Server resources, including users, groups, installations, modules, and etc. So this multi-tenancy support allows you to create a scenario like this one. Before this, in the single tenancy, you need to, like if you are going to serve multiple companies, you need to deploy one RAD Server for each company. But here, with the multi-tenancy, you can split the server and have a different set of resources, one for each company that you are going to serve. So how to install RAD Server? This is a common question we receive all the time. So RAD Server requires Enterprise Edition of RAD Studio, Delphi, or C++. Every Enterprise Edition of Delphi or C++ has a 5-user development and evaluation license as part of your standard installation. So actually, RAD Server is installed with your Delphi or C++ builder installation. There is nothing that you need to download or etc. This is a really common question we receive. So if we pass to this VM where I'm running Delphi, let's go to my installation folder. Just to make this clear, here under the Delphi installation folder, in the bin 64-bit folder, you can see the binaries from the RAD Server. So all all the files, all the resources you need to create your projects are installed by default with your Delphi Enterprise or C++ Builder Enterprise. So all the dependencies and also the binaries for IIS deployment and for Apache deployment on Linux are available here inside your installation. Are used only for development. You're not going to use this to deploy your solution. So if you load here the dev server, you can see the standard servers that are loaded. So we can open a browser and test one of the servers, like the version of the MES we are using. So in summary, these binaries are used only for development, and you don't need to open this manually. The IDE will do this for you. But when you are going to deploy your solution, then you have a set of files that you need to send, or for IIS on Windows or Apache on Linux. So in summary, all that you need to develop your solution is already included in your standard Delphi or C++ Builder installation, starting in the Enterprise Edition. So a RAD Server distribution license will be required when you are going to deploy your RAD Server solution with an unlimited number of users. So for this, starting on 10.2.2, we have included a RAD Server single site deployment license. So it's a real license, a full license, with one server and unlimited users available in Delphi Enterprise, C++ Builder Enterprise, also in the Architect editions. So you have, if you are in the current version, you have a full license of the RAD server that can be used in production. So let's run some demos with RAD server. So before entering the demos of RAD server itself, I'd like to present you a new feature that was added in the 10.2.2 that will make easier the integration from RAD server with Session. So let's take a look on this sample. It's a JSON writer. So in 10.2.2, we have added a new component, a new batch move component dedicated to JSON generation. So this JSON writer has the capability of generating JSON strings. So we have here a connection, a file connection, a customer table, very simple, in the grid. And then we have a batch move. The batch move is connected to a reader. This reader here, the dataset reader, is pointing to our customer table. And also the batch move is pointing to the writer. This writer is a JSON writer, which will be used to generate our JSON string. So if we look to the code here, basically we are creating a string and then passing this string to the JSON writer, executing the batch move, and the result will be presented in this memo. So if we run this sample, okay, JSON, here you have the result. So a JSON file is standard with some configurations that is something that you can change in the JSON writer. Okay, but to simplify this, or better, to make this easier to be used in your projects, I have created here a simple class helper. So it's a very basic class helper, but that helps you to write less code. So we are declaring here the class helper, and let's focus for now in this method, in the asJSON method. So our class helper, basically, in this case, will look to the dataset, will fill the parameters of the components that are here on this data model. So we are creating the data model, we are filling the parameters and executing the batch move, sending the result back here, and then destroying the controls. So with this very simple class helper, you can write a code like this. Customer table as JSON array. So you don't need to put the components on the form or the data model, etc. Just customer table as JSON array. So if you execute there, then the process, again the project class helper, and then you have the same results as you can see here, but with just one line of code. So this is important because you are going to use this a lot in your RAD Server samples. So after we are going to explore the other methods we have here. Okay, so this is something new. Was introduced in the 10.2.2, the batch move JSON writer. Okay, so let's read and look to our first RAD Server sample. So before opening the sample, let me show you how to create a RAD Server project. So if we go to the File, New, Projects, then we have EMS package. So you can create an input package or a package with resource. You can give it a name. You can base your package in data models or units. And then finally, you're going to define the endpoints that you are going to support. So the methods of the HTTP that we are going to support in these hazards. So RedServer is all about the standard HTTP verbs. So you have get the item, post the item, and delete. The standard HTTP methods. So when you click finish, you end with this template of code. So you have the methods, and then you need to fill these methods with some results. Of course, in a real sample, you are going to instantiate here a connection to the database and serialize the JSON back to your client using our class helper that we just created in the previous example. So, if we modify here the get, we can write here ExtJS for Delphi developers, and we can run the sample. So I'm going to save. And the result of our project is actually a BPL. So when you run the project, let's see, look here, run parameters. The IDE will automatically call the dev server of MES, so the development server, that allows you to test your application and also to easily debug your application. So if you read here, run, we have the development server loaded, all the standard modules, and also your module here, project one. So let's open the browser. The standard method is the version, the standard hazards, but we can put here the name of our hazards. So this one, and we have the phrase that we put in the get method, because get is the default method. If you don't specify anything here, or if you don't send a post or a put. Okay, so this is how you create a RAD Server project. So let's now open here this one. And this project, this BPL, this package, has two hazards. We are going to focus firstly in this one, the customer one. So basically, we have a connection, employee connection, with the other components that are needed, like the interface driver, In this case, I'm using Interbase also to serve the data. You can connect here to any other database. So we have the customer table and the update SQL that we are going to explore later. So let's take a look in the code. Let's focus firstly in this get method. So this is what we have for the get. Just a select, and then we are serializing the customer table as a JSON string. So in this case, our class helper has another method, JSON string, which results a string, a JSON string that is the correct format to send in the body of our response using the setString method. So as a result of this, if we run our RAD server, we might have a server here, so let's shut down this one because they are using the same port. Again, so open the browser, and this was named as customer. So just put here customer, and you have the customer dataset serialized in your browser. So it's standard JSON. You can see these raw data that can be used by our clients like the ExtJS. So our first sample with ExtJS connect to the data to our backend or RAD server will consume this get method. Okay, so let's take a look on how to build our first application with the ExtJS. So let's start by taking a look in what I have started here. So if I go to Essential folder here, I have the CMD installed. So this is the tool that allows us to creating the application and also distributing your application, packaging and distributing your application. We have the frameworks here, so you can work with different versions of the frameworks. We have here the Essential Architect, which we are going to look later. Essential Inspector, some templates, and the theme. Okay, so let's focus firstly on the CMD. So CMD allows you to automatically create the application. So I have CMD on my path. So let's go here to this folder, my root folder for web development. And I'm going to create here a new folder called ext101. Let's open command as administrator. Let's go to inetpub root ext. So here we are going to generate our first full ExtJS application. Now using the framework installed on the local computer, locally on this hard drive and these Windows. So let's say essential generate app using the ext framework. This app will be called ext101 in this folder. So let's run the command. So the CMD will start working and copying not only the framework, but creating a basic project where you can start working on it. This base project has a modern framework, and then we're going to understand this better. The modern framework, the classic framework, and also the files that are part of your application. So that's it. As a result, we have here a full ExtJS application. So in general, in the app folder, you have things that are common for the entire application. So you have a model, you have a store, and the view controller. Also, we have here the classic framework, which means is the framework used in desktop applications. And you have the modern framework, which is the touch framework used for mobile device. So normally in application that you want to target both desktop browsers and the mobile devices, you are going to implement the views in the class framework as well in the modern framework. But all your code in terms of logic and the models declaration and the controllers will be reused by both the classic views and the modern views. So this is basically how EXT project is organized. So if we go back here to this command prompt, we can do now sensor app watch. And watch is internal web server that can be used to test your application. So as you can see here, it's pointing to this port on localhost. So we can test our application using this local web server, so you don't need to deploy your project just to test or to debug and etc. So let's open the browser and point the browser to exactly this port. So localhost port 1841. And this is like a template that is used to create this application, a default template that you can, of course, modify. So we have a menu on the left and the grid with some fake data. Of course, this data is static inside your JavaScript. The JavaScript generated by this for this application, but we have a grid and the menu. So our first job here is to replace this data with data that was provided by our RAD server, which is running here. So let's close this browser and let's shut down also this watch, right? So I have exactly the same, same application, but here in this another folder. So if you look here, we have exactly the same extrude tree, but let's investigate how connect this application to our RAD server instance from here. So first thing is our first task is to modify our model. So if you look here, this was the original model, which has basically 3 fields. And then we have changed our personal model. And now we have some fields that are the same from the ones provided here by our RAD server. So if you put here customer, we are calling the customer hazards, and we are showing some fields like the customer, contact first, last. So this is why we change it here to match the name of the fields from our RAD server, right? So first thing is to create or define our model. So this is done here. Then in the store folder, we have the previous version. So the previous version was looking to data that was static here. And then our new version, instead of that, is running a JAX call to our RAD server, to our REST endpoint customer. So this is the syntax for doing a REST call. Basically, we are saying this REST call is going to use the customer model. So the customer model, which was declared here, right? The customer model. And doing a AJAX call. We are going to learn that we can use also a standard REST call, and we are going to use REST call in the other samples. But here we have a call to this endpoint, and we are reading the data or parsing the data using JSON. Okay. Then we need to go to our view. So I'm using the classic framework because we are going to run in a browser, in a desktop browser. So our view was prepared. So let's see the old version. Basically, we have the declaration of a grid pointing to the fields that was declared in our model. But now our new list points to our customer model, right? I have added some resources like filters and grouping. So basically, all that you need to do is to add these plugins in your grid, and then using this store, and I'm declaring here the columns. So first name, last name, pointing to the data index, which is the name of the JSON field we are receiving. Okay. Okay, so let's run this one and see this project in action. So let me open a command here. Change app watch. So let's wait for the CMD to load the app watch, which allows us to test our application. Localhost, the same port. So just a few seconds. Okay, waiting for chance. So if you go here on this port, now loading, and you have our grid, but now getting data from the RAD server. So this grid has a lot of features, like you can, of course, sort, you can adjust the columns, you can group by a field, like the city. So you can expand. You have also filters. So let's say filters, and then I can put here, say England. So it's a wait with all the features. This is an event that we saw listener in the code. So that's it. Here we have the Essential Client application talking with our RAD server using AJAX call to this endpoint, the customer endpoint. So this is the first sample connecting the both words, Essential on one side and the RAD server in the other side. So we learned the basics about RAD server, and then we have created our first application, ExtJS application, using the CMD, and we saw how to connect this application to our RAD server backend. In this case, we used the AJAX proxy. So now let's take a look on the architect. The architect is a visual editor that allows developers quickly creating web applications using the ExtJS framework. So I go back to my VM. Let's start Essential Architect. Here you are. Let's create a new project. So you can create projects based on the modern or classic frameworks. For the modern frameworks, you have some templates that you can use. As well, there are templates also for the classic framework. Again, the classic framework is only dedicated for browsers that runs on desktops. And the modern framework has support for also desktops and mobile devices. So you can create projects using the modern and serve the both platforms. So let's start creating here a blank project. This process of creating a project inside the Essential Architect automatically is doing behind the scenes what the CMD did for us when we used the CMD manually. So as you can see here, we have views. You can change this view. So the initial view is looking here for iPhone, but let's work in a desktop application. So we have a front designer, right? We have a component library here. We have a kind of object inspector and the structure of our project. So we can start by here adding a panel. So let's choose here a panel. This panel automatically will use all the available space. This is the default for this for modern applications. Let's put here a button. So this button, I'd like to configure here some properties. So first the text. So call RAD Server. Okay. Let's also change here the width. And so let's put this button on the center. And else adjust the Y property. So this Y property allows you to choose between some predefined styles that are part from this theme you are using. So a button, of course, can have some event. So let's add here an event. So we have the top event, generate binding, and you can go here and the other code. So very similar from RAD, you have the design and you have the code. This is the code that I need to add on this button to make a call to our RAD server. So I'm just using Ajax again and getting the version from RAD server, and then I'm writing in the button the value of the version, the server name, and then the version. So let's save the application. Then in this moment, the IDE, the architect, is initializing the CMD exactly like we did manually, but Teddy are going to do all the work for you. So at the end, we will see a very similar result from executing the CMD manually by the command prompt. Okay, ready to go. So everything is saved. And we can hit here this button, preview. And the IDE, the architect, will load the application and execute the application in the browser. For us, we have here RAD Server executing. So this is the result, Embarcadero LMS version 3.0. So let's create a new project. This time I'm going to use this template, the login template. So the idea is to validate the user and the password directly in our RAD Server. So RAD Server has user resource, and this resource is what we're going to use. So let's create the application. Let's save here in some place. Okay. The CMD is initializing. Let's wait. Let's change it here to the desktop layout. And on the sign in button, we have an event. So we are going to add here some code to properly validate directly on the RAD server. So I'm putting here the code. So what we have here, we are looking first for the form. So the form where the controls are located, these controls. Then we are getting here the username and then the password. Then I'm building here a JSON string. These are the parameters required by the RAD server. And then we have a call, in this case, a REST call, doing a post, passing this JSON data as a parameter. So if the login is okay, we are moving to the another view. So here we have the login panel, and we have the main panel. So we are moving to this main panel if the login is okay. If not, there is here an alert message saying invalid credentials. Right? So the project is saved. Let's run. So we can click here. We have invalid credentials. I have a user created on the RAD server users repository. So you can test this same user. So the login works. Then we can sign out and go back to the login form. So if we put anything wrong here, invalid credentials, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we log it. Okay, so in this case, we are using the user's resource from our RAD server. Okay, so the next example will be a CRUD application. So application that can do search and then insert, update, and delete in your REST backend in your RAD server. So first thing is to expand a little bit our RAD server implementation. So let's visit again our JSON wrapper here. And also let's focus now on this country resource. So we have basically the same configuration from the previous answers. You have a connection, a country table, and update SQL. Look to the code. We can see here all the verbs were implemented. So I have get it, item, post, put the item, and delete. So get, exactly as in the previous example, just a select, and you have the table, country table, as a JSON string. On the get item, the client application is to send a parameter, item, and then we are doing a select using the country as the ID, and then also returning JSON string. The reason I'm using parameters here is because parameters are better in terms of preventing the SQL injection. But the innovation here is actually on the post and the put item methods. So let's take a look on this. So the post needs to pass body with the content of, the data that we are going to use to update the backend. So we have a new method here in our JSON helper, in our class helper, called insert from JSON. So let's take a look on this method. So the insert from JSON basically is receiving the JSON from our client, in this case from our ExtJS application, and using the custom JSON dataset adapter, we are converting the JSON in a temporary dataset, right? So if you look here to insert into the insert from JSON method, we are creating the data model. Then we are calling this JSON to dataset. So we have a main table here. This main table is also here on our data model. So this we call it JSON data. So we are passing here the JSON data as a parameter, is a main table. And the JSON to dataset is basically receiving the JSON and converting the JSON in a dataset. In this case, we have a dataset with one row, one line of data in memory. So next step is to append a new record in the final dataset and assign the values from the field that are now on our main table. So we assign each field with the value that was received from our client, and then posting the dataset. Before calling this method here in RAD Server, as you can see, we are just opening the table with an invalid SQL, meaning we are just creating the dataset without executing a real SQL in the backend, because it's not necessary. It's just to create the dataset. So this dataset will receive the JSON and then apply the updates using the FARDAC normal RedServer stuff in the database. This update SQL has the SQL commands for the insert, modify, and delete. I'm using this update SQL because in the delete, we can just execute this the SQL command directly without using the dataset, without sending a request to the backend, to the database side. In this case, of course, you can, instead of doing this select, this just to open the dataset and then filling the data with the JSON you received and then applying the updates, you can also opt for writing here update comment. But in terms of reducing the code you are writing. I think this is an interesting approach. So basically, we open the data set with an invalid SQL, an invalid sentence, which will result in nothing, just to open the data set. Then insert from JSON is receiving the JSON from ExtJS, filling the memory table, and then filling inside the data in our count table, and then we are applying it. Similar approach we have here in the put item. The put is used to update an existing record. So in this case, a parameter needs to be passed, and then we are doing a select with a valid parameter. So we have one record, one line of data in this data set at this moment. Then we call update from JSON. So let me do a build here. The update from JSON, also now part of our class helper, will edit the data set, assign the update data, and post. So finally, we have the apply updates. And here in the delete, we are just looking to the delete command from the update SQL and passing as a parameter the ID and executing the SQL. So there's no cursor here, we're just executing this delete and the commit. So with this, we have full implementation of the get the item, post, put the item, and delete the item with a reduced amount of code. So let's run our RAD server again. And let's understand how the client was created. So let's start by creating a new project. By this time, I'm using the classic framework. So I choose here a blank project, create. Let me save this project here. And the first thing is define a model. So in the model, we are going to define the kind of the data we are going to see in this application. Of course, a project can have several models here. So the data we are looking for, let me open here the browser, you come from the country hazards. This is the country hazards. These are the fields we have in the country hazards. So we are going to create here in our project 2 fields. One will be the country and another one will be the currency. Okay, so we have 2 fields in our model. Let's take a look in the code. These fields can be, of course, configured here with a lot of details, right? Also, you can choose here the type of your field, like this one is a string, of course, and this one is a string. So we have a basic model or data model for our project. So here in the architect, we have this data UI builder. And the data UI builder allows you to look to an existing model, like this one. And this wizard will generate the basic stuff that you need to look for data, and also to do an insert and the update, and that's it. So I'm basing the application in this model. You can here in advanced you can define how your data is going to be presented. You have a lot of configurations here for the list view and also for the tail view. These are configurations for our form. Then we have the data store. In this case, we are going to use a REST proxy, right? I don't want to create test data. You have configurations for the controller and the actions that you are going to see, like in this controller, select, save, edit, etc. So let's generate the project. And as a result, the architect is going to create for us the view, also the forms for data edition, and all the code using the REST proxy to apply the data back to the database. So if you look here to this model, we have the concept of a model, the controller, and the view model. So in the model, of course, in the view, of course, we have the visual part of the application. So if you go to the code, basically we have a grid and panels and etc. So we can explore here some details like the data display, etc. Everything here is automatically configured. Then we have the model, and here is where we need to put some configurations. So this is our proxy. Our proxy is using will be configured to bring the data and fill our data model, that will finally send the data to our view. So we can here add the URL for our model, our hazards. So this one, let's put it here. Also, there are some parameters here in the model that we want to configure, like auto load and auto sync. So if you click here in this model, in the view model, we can see a preview of the data, right? If we go to the controller, we can understand how the data is being applied to the database. Like, let's say here, when we do add, so you have a new record, creating a new instance of the model, filling the record with the data from the form, the edit, the remove, so we have a store dot remove. So everything is based on REST, and basically the ExtJS will implement the verbs exactly like in the standard RAD server works. So you have the get, you have the post, put, but that exact in the same way. Actually, the ExtJS will generate these the calls automatically. So the framework you take care of this, and you generate the appropriate URL to make the calls to the RAD server, adding the parameters, the name, the ID of the record you are trying to update, and etc. So let's take a look on the application running. So here we have the data list. This is a grid. You can navigate, and then we can choose one country here and change the keys, save. If we do a refresh, the data was saved properly. Then we can move back to pound, save. We can remove, we can add a new country. save, and if you do refresh again, was saved. So everything works. We can remove as well. So we have a full CRUD, a full application doing updates on RAD Server. If we look here to the RAD Server log, we can observe the methods being called, like the get, and then post, get, delete, get. So we are using exactly the REST model, the standard REST model. Okay, the last thing that I'd like to show from the Architect IDE is the grid builder. So the grid builder helps you creating your grids, defining the editors and etc. Including, it's possible to have addition directly inside the grid, inline. So let's take a look on this. Let's create a new project. It will be again a classic project. Let's save. So for this one, we are going to use the customer table. We have the customer table and the customer answers here. All the verbs, also the REST methods, were implemented exactly in the same way from the country answers. So we have the get the item, put, delete, etc. We're using exactly the same code, right? So we have the RAD server running here. Let's start by creating here a model. So let's create our model. We are going to call this customer model. This is the data that the ExtJS will receive. So I will copy this first record. Let's put this on any text editor. Okay. Let's do some. Come up here. I just want the field names in array. So okay, just one more. Here we are. So we are creating a model. Back to the architect. Let's add here some fields, so we can do this, and all the fields are automatically created. Let's add in this model REST proxy. So we have here the REST proxy. The REST proxy has a variable, so it's the same from here. Right. There's some parameter here, like the ID parameter. In our case, is the cust no. Right. And I think that's it. Here in the model. So we have the ID parameter. Okay. So this is our REST repository and our model. So if we look to the code, basically this is what we have. Declaration of the fields and the proxy, right? Next step is to create a visual interface. So I'm going to add here a container. automatically the architect generate for us the view model and the view controller and the view, right? So in this container, we are going to add, the reason I'm putting a container here is because there is a layout property with will be fit, and inside this container we have a grid. So I'm going to add a grid panel above this container, and here, let me first configure this store. So let's add here a store. My store will point to our model, right? We will have an outload, outsync. I think that's it. That's all that we need. The store needs to have a name. So is the customer store, right? And here we can see a preview of the data, right? And right here in our grid, we have the grid builder. So the grid builder helps a lot because you can just select here your model, and then you can define everything here, like the columns and the editors for each column, and if we are going to have the row available for edition, and the fields that are required, actions, so we can generate the actions automatically in the controller, like the whole select, the selection change, etc. We can personalize also here the data store, which will be pressed. I don't want to test data, so generate. And the result is that we have, let me remove these fields that were automatically generated. And you have the fields from our customer store, right? Already available here. So if we run the application, save, and run, we have data from directly from our RAD server, and we can update the data right here in our grids, right? So this is how to configure our grid to allow data editing. So this was about the grid builder that helps you configuring your grid. If we look here, we can see the put method was called, which means the data was updated, right? Okay, so here you have more information about Essential, in particular for the ExtJS. Also, more information for RAD Server, documentation, samples, videos, and that's it for this webinar. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, Fernando. That was really cool. Actually, I'm super keen to get to the question and answers because I've got a bunch of questions as well based on that. But before we get there, there's just a few more slides that I want to go through. One of the just a couple of things, like I talked about. I'm going to talk a little bit about Angular and React and how it relates to this, and then also talk about how the product's licensed and sold and all the rest of it. But there's just a couple of quotes that I really liked that I pulled out of some of the case studies from customers who are using ExtJS in production. And I really like this one because I think I've built my whole career on sitting on other people's shoulders. So I like this one from Chris Babcock about, the decision to use ExtJS was easy. We preferred to sit on Sensu's shoulders and call ourselves tall rather than reinvent the wheel. And I think that really came across in the demo, is that it's a little bit like we on the Delphi and CBuilder side are used to. We leverage all of these pre-built components and focus much more on the value that we add, our business code and our core purpose of the application, rather than worrying about, the plumbing underneath, until we want to get down there and control that. Yeah, so that's seems like there's a lot of commonality. And then this one, we saw a little bit of this in the demo, but looking through the website, this seems to go very far. This real data focus inside ExtJS, and not just small packets of data, but dealing with large data and doing pivot tables and those sorts of things. So seems like a lot of the strengths of ExtJS seem to line up nicely with the strengths of Delphi and C++ builder that we're used to. Just wanted to quickly talk about this, especially on the Angular side. I'm more familiar with Angular. I'm less familiar with React because we've been using Angular on some projects. But this question comes up quite a lot around why would you use this versus Angular and React? And I think one of the things for me, I mentioned it before, one of the things that's become clear for me is that it's really it depends whether you want to sort of custom build up the set of components and libraries and everything that you're using, or if you want an integrated set out of the box. Angular, actually I've got another slide in a second that's probably better for this. I'll come back to some of these. Angular is, I think, a really cool technology. The two big issues that I had with it as someone who was more familiar with Delphi and CBuilder was, number one, was that it was really different. It's a very opinionated framework, and that's not bad, but you have to understand its opinion about things and how it likes you to do things. So you have to learn that, and it's not exactly how my brain was wired as a RAD Studio developer. But secondly, it didn't give me everything I needed. I kind of went to it thinking it was like a VCL and a FireMonkey, where I had this stuff and then I could use it and build an application. But I kind of quickly realized that it gave me the core platform, if you like. But then I had to go looking elsewhere for UI pieces and for theming pieces and for layout management and for testing tools and for all these other things that I needed. And so your Angular application ends up being, my Angular application ends up being kind of different from your Angular application, because I've chosen this set of different frameworks and libraries to combine with Angular, whereas you might have chosen this set, and for different reasons. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is bad. Having this capability and this flexibility is awesome, because I can choose exactly the ones that I want. But you do it with your eyes open. You do it knowing that by choosing all of this, I'm taking on the responsibility to keep all of these things up to date and to make sure that all these different libraries, when a new version of Bootstrap comes out, it's me that has to make sure that it's compatible with all the other libraries that I've chosen. So you kind of have to do it knowing that, yeah, I'm doing it for a reason, but I'm taking on a bunch of responsibility that maybe I don't want. And so that, for me, that's where ExtJS comes in, because I can get everything I need out of the box. or sorry, everything with a little asterisk next to it. You know, most of the things I need out of the box, but when I do need to pull something in, I can still do that. I've still got the flexibility to do it, but I'm doing it in a very focused and contained way. I'm not pulling in, you know, 15 different frameworks and libraries and then having to manage it all. I'm pulling in this specific piece that I want because it's a capability that isn't in the core platform. Yeah. And I know probably when we get to the Q&A, we might have a chat about React and Angular, because I know, Jean-Philippe, you've got more experience in this space, and sort of maybe you can tell us a bit when we get to that point about some real world scenarios where people have joined them together. Yeah. Okay. So, like I was saying, Sencha really, or ExtJS, I should say, really aims at providing you with this full framework of everything you might need out of the box to build an application. Yeah, rather than piecing it together yourself. Okay. Quick discussion about the different editions and that sort of stuff. If you go to the website, you'll see that there are three editions: Standard, Pro, and Premium. There's the basic breakdown of them there, but for me, especially after seeing that demo, for me, one of the big differences was Architect, the tool that Fernando was showing at the end there. The more I saw of it, the more excited I got about it, because it's you know, it's still true to JavaScript. It's not trying to be Delphi on a different underpinning. I think that's probably not what I'm looking for. You know, I want something that's native to JavaScript and to the platform that it's on, but the fact that it works and it's familiar to me as given my background is kind of cool, I think. And especially that bit at the end where you know, you could point it at your REST endpoint and it generated your model and your starting point UI and that sort of stuff from it. Just blew me away. That's really cool. So if you have a look at it, sorry, I'm getting excited and carried away. If you have a look at this breakdown, you know, the core framework and the CMD tool and you know, integration with Visual Studio Code and that sort of thing is available in the standard offering. Pro extends on top of that with more IDE plugins. So if you're using Eclipse or JetBrains or whatever it is that you like, it also gives you that Architect tool, that RAD tool for building up your application, and also the styling tool. And then Premium on top of that gives you more, gives you the debugging tool, but also the more focused, I guess you'd categorize these as more focused data support, so pivot grids and that sort of thing for visualizing and for analyzing data. And again, when we get to the Q&A, maybe the other guys will have some more input into that. It is licensed per developer, so kind of the familiar way that we used to with Delphi and C++ Builder. And it's as far as I understand, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but as far as I understand, there's no runtime licensing. It's all developer-based licensing. So you're not paying a runtime for your application. You're paying for your developers to use it. I'm just watching.
That's correct.
Oh, good. I was just watching Fernando type into the Skype window as I was saying that. I thought he was going to come in and correct me.
There is only one exception in a very, very specific case. If you are distributing a software that is actually creating a new web application using ExtJS, it's like similar to, you know, of course the usage of the ExtJS framework. So that's a limitation. Yeah,
but like you say, that's very focused. Like most people, that's not what they're going to be doing. They're going to be building web applications, not web application tools. Yeah. Okay, cool. Also, you may as well stay unmuted, Jean-Philippe, because I think we're about to get into Q&A. I've got some of the same links that Fernando put up, where you can grab the trial version, the quick start guide, and some more examples up on the web. Also, our email address if people want to dig deeper or dive in a bit more or ask more questions. Just the last thing that I wanted to highlight for everyone before we get into Q&A was just we appreciate this is, this is a long session. You've been online for a couple of hours now, and so we appreciate the time that you give us. And so if you are interested in any of the ExtJS products, we've extended, got Embarcadero to agree to extend a promotion to you as attendees. So there's 10% offer on the professional edition, which is the one that includes the architect tool, and 15 off the premium edition. So just reach out to us again at hello@codepartners.com, and we can talk about that. And just to remind you, given this was a webinar aimed at Delphi and CBuilder guys, just to remind you that until the end of the March, the last ever upgrade amnesty is running. And so if you're on a super old version of Delphi or CBuilder, even if you're on Delphi 1, and I still run into people who are doing production code on Delphi 1, even if you're on Delphi 1, you can upgrade before the end of the month. You don't have to buy a new user license. So again, have a look at that. Also bear in mind, if you're on, I don't know if there was a Delphi 1 Pro, but if you're on an old version of Pro, Embarcadero with the 10.2.3 update recently rolled all of the mobile support into Pro just out of the box. So if you've been thinking about maybe upgrading and haven't got around to it or weren't sure, now might be a good time to do it, especially if you're on Pro, because you'll pick up all of the iOS and Android support for the same price. Okay. Anyway, so that's enough of that. If you're not sure about what any of that means, just reach out to us and we'll explain it all. So Fernando and Jean-Philippe, thank you for your time. Now might be a good time to start dealing with some question and answers. And I've got heaps, but I don't want to dominate this, so someone else can go first.
Okay, so thank you also, Malcolm, for the opportunity of presenting this webinar. So I think we have some questions here. Let me take a look. There are two, not exactly the same, but similar questions. One is about plans to include Sencha ExtJS in a single Embarcadero subscription, and another one when we are going to see integration of Sencha inside the Delphi IDE. Of course, the people are talking about this and that, but right now there is no plan about integrating. Like you saw in the webinar, we have the architect. So the architect is the tool for creating the applications in the website. So there's no plans to put this inside the Delphi IDE that I know. But regarding the commercial side, I'm really not sure. I don't know, Malcolm, if you have any additional information about having a unique license to everything, or but I think for now it's still separate things because the company is still separate in terms of business.
Yeah, I think in the like you mentioned during the webinar, in the 10.2.2 update for RAD Studio, and then again in 10.2.3, we've started seeing more integration between both FireDAC and RAD Server into Sencha. Integration of the IDE, I don't know exactly what that would look like. As you say, Architect is really the IDE for Sencha. I guess there could be some smarts around if I'm working in the Delphi IDE on my RAD server backend, being easily able to drive that out and maybe use that, what was it called, the data UI builder tool that you were talking about. So maybe there's some sort of targeted integration points that can be done in the future. But like I said before, personally, I actually like that the RAD tool for Sencha is actually built on the native, functionality. It's a web tool. It's these sorts of things where, because otherwise it just ends up being this weird compromise, I find personally. But yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
If I can add my 50 cents.
Sure, $1.
It's not yeah. Yeah, my experience of the way web development is currently going is it's becoming pretty rare to have a full stack developer working on both back end and front end, and especially because it's really expensive to have those kind of profiles. And actually, when you work in a team where there are web developers and back end developers, they all have their most favorite tools. And actually, you just exchange data between the client and the server. So the deal, the contract you actually the contract you have between backend developers and front-end developers is defined by the data, the JSON structure you exchange. And actually, yeah, it's most of the time I think it's a nonsense to have a unique IDE for everything.
Yeah. So I mean, and that makes sense to me. Like it's not necessarily the person who's working on the RAD server piece or the REST piece that it would be the same person, you know, working on the front end. So maybe it does come back to what Fernando's talking about, where there's some sort of licensing bundle where there's an easy way to get all of these pieces in one suite, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the same person using them.
Yeah, exactly. I understand your point there.
Yeah.
Depending on the situation, I think maybe you have situations where you have like one guy doing everything, but it's also common to have different profiles doing this kind of development.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I've had to do the web front end for things, I can knock together something that is functional, but it's far from a nice workflow or you know, it's far from being a nice UX. So there's definitely a point where I need to hand off to somebody else to make this, you know, an experience that someone will enjoy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because ExtJS is probably the best, the ideal framework if you want to work on both the back end and the front end, because it's really easy to develop something, you know, without understanding the details of HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript itself, because you're not going to write extensive JavaScript at the first version of your software. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you plan to have Delphi developers to write ExtJS code, JavaScript code, ExtJS is the ideal option. I mean.
Yeah, and it seems that architect tool is a nice on-ramp to that as well, because you can kind of you don't have to go and have this huge learning curve to get started. You can get started and then gradually dig in and explore what's going under the covers. You know, even to the point where once, as I think you were saying in the chat window, is once you're up and running, a lot of ExtJS developers don't use the architect tool. At that point, they dive back out to just editing text because they're comfortable and they're all over it. But as a ramp up and as a way for less experienced developers to still contribute, that it seems like a nice blend of the two.
Yeah, I confirm. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that we were chatting a little bit about during the session was around. I know I mentioned that, you know, I had a slide in there that talked about ExtJS versus React and versus Angular, but you were talking about, you know, using them together and why you might use them together or why you might use one or the other. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yes, actually, you might have noted on the Sencha website that there is something called EXT React. So it's a kind of subset of components you can use with React, because actually ExtJS it's technically two things. You have the core framework and you have the components. And actually, those components could be used with another technical framework like Angular or React. So if you have a customer if you absolutely want to use React as the foundation of your JavaScript code, you can still use ExtJS as the component set for React.
Okay, that makes sense, and that's actually, you know, that making that distinction in ExtJS between the underlying framework and the components also helps explain a little better why it's not directly equivalent to a React or an Angular.
Yes, and the problem, well, at the moment, React developers and Angular developers have troubles actually to find the best combination of components for their application, because you might find a very good grid, very good provider for a grid, and another very good provider for, I don't know, a clever combo box, but then you will have different ways of using the combo box outside of a grid and the combo box when you try to edit a cell of a grid.
Yep.
See what I mean?
Yep.
So it's really hard to find an extensive. You won't find it anyway. To find an extensive component set that is actually comprehensive and working the same across your whole application. So that's why ExtJS is really good, even if you are thinking about using React as a JavaScript foundation framework.
Yep. Okay. I just noticed one of the other questions that's just come in was about tutorials. I mean, I had a couple of links in there, and I know that. Sorry. I don't know what's just happened to my desktop. I had a couple of links in there to some further resources, but are there any good tutorials and that sort of thing that you would recommend people go to?
Yes, actually, there is a good initiative from Sencha that started, I think it was 4 months ago. And it's you now have blog posts from Mark Gusmano, if I remember, who explains step by step, very clearly for new developers, what is ExtJS and how to use it. So I would recommend, of course, using this, reading those blog posts. And the second is the API. The ExtJS API is really good. It's really good. So you have live demonstration. You can modify online the code to see what is going on if you change that parameter of this configuration property. And the online documentation is really good as well. So yeah.
I'm just having a look. Is this the blog post or the gentleman in the blog posts you were talking about? This Mark Gusmano?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the one? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, ExtJS from scratch, part 1. Okay, cool. And yeah, the little that I've been doing over the getting ready for this this webinar, the documentation is actually pretty impressive. I was quite pleasantly surprised. Okay, actually, one of the comments that's just come in the chat window was about Iwan was hoping that there would be an integration of Delphi and ExtJS so that you could just target the web as another platform selection. That's my understanding. That's not a million miles from what that what's called UniGUI is attempting to do, and it's based on ExtJS, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's based on the ExtJS. It's like a set of components, and you can generate the project working inside the Delphi IDE. But it has some concepts that, like I was looking into that, and it's very good in terms of productivity. I mean, you can get approached really quickly. But my question is, like, when you need to do things that is not provided by the framework itself, you know. So when you need to add some stuff manually or components, things like that. So I found using the ExtJS directly more something more, not only open, but also something that allows you to do anything you want. There's no boundaries, there's no limitation. So it's something to really look to the project you are going to do and see if it fits to your project or not.
Yeah, and to be honest, that goes back to my earlier comment about you know, when I mean, part of the reason that I think a lot of people chose Delphi in the first place was that it gave me the productivity, but it was native to the platform, and I could get down sort of as deep as I wanted to. Whereas, not picking on UniGUI, but this is, you know, the same with a lot of different frameworks, is I find that it's good for getting going, but then when I want to get down deep, there's a bunch of compromises because I'm actually not developing in the language or whatever that's going to be happening at runtime. I'm developing in some other tool and it's translating for me. So the fact that ExtJS and the architect tool and everything is just built on the native technology itself means that it's ExtJS and JavaScript all the way down, and if I need to go deep, I can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've held on to people for 2.25 hours now, so I think we should perhaps wrap this up. But I want to thank both of you guys, because this has been, in some ways, I feel like this was a session for me, just a little bit of personal training to get going on this. But based on the number of people who registered for the event, I think a lot of people had the same desire to get something that got going that was based on their knowledge as a Delphi developer. So thank you both for being involved. Just so everybody is aware, we are recording this and we will put it up online. So everyone who registered, I'll send out the details of where you can get where you can go to view the replay. I don't know, probably in the next couple of days, depending on how quickly I can turn it around. But otherwise, guys, unless there's anything else you want to add, I think we should wrap it up and let people get on with their day.
Yeah, okay, I can see two more questions, but the first one I definitely, because I'm not a Delphi developer, I can't answer this question. And the second one about debugging. So yeah, there are tools, Inspector, provided by Sencha to help you debugging from your browser and having access to the ExtJS objects. But actually, most of the developers actually are using the dev tools from their browser to debug, because they are really good.
Yeah, so that's what I was expecting. So that's interesting to hear that, you know, what I've done in the past is just go into the Chrome dev tools and set a breakpoint, and you can start stepping through things and doing all the things that we're kind of used to doing in Delphi.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, well, that might actually be a good excuse to do some follow-up articles or videos or whatever to go into what the debugging tools do as well, as a follow-up to this. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Fernando. You put in an awesome amount of work here. Like I mentioned in the chat window, every time in my mind while I was watching this, I was thinking, well, I wonder if it's going to show me how to authenticate. You know, within 10 minutes, you had shown me how to authenticate. And then same thing again when I wondered if you were going to show me how to do CRUD. So thank you. That was an awesome amount of work. I really appreciate it. And Jean-Philippe, thank you for coming on board and helping us you know, correct all of our understandings of ExtJS. Hopefully we can get you involved again in the future.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, everyone, for watching this webinar.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch up with you online soon. Cheers.